of Sports Shorts. I'm your host, Bobby Hacker, the Sports Shorts guy. And my guest today is Laura Warren, longtime SLA member and currently the Chief Legal and Administrative Officer of Chicago Fire FC of the Major League Soccer. Welcome.
Thanks, Bobby. Glad to be here.
Really happy to have you. I think the best way to start is the way we always do start, which is to tell people about what your current job is and then talk a little bit about your path, because I think your path is so interesting as you went from big law firm to college, now you're in pro. So talk to us about starting, of course, with what are your roles as both the Chief Legal and Administrative Officer?
Yeah, happy to do that. I've had a few stops along the way, so I'll hit them all. So my current role, I'm with the Chicago Fire, the Major League Soccer team in Chicago. Been here about 5 years. Was hired as their first in-house lawyer, which was awesome, getting to start your own legal department. And so oversee all things legal and have a team of 3 individuals very shortly. Myself and 2 other attorneys in that space. And then after I was here for a couple of years, I got asked to oversee our HR team and more recently our IT team as well. So I oversee kind of all of the administrative functions of the office, plus oversee legal on the day-to-day basis for Major League Soccer team. So it is quite the gig. I'm happy to get into the details. You know, you run the gamut from managing all the transactional work, all of the litigation work. I also do some government relations. So that's been a fun part of the job. And as you noted, kind of came here in an indirect path. So I actually have grown up with sports my whole life. Both of my parents were coaches. My dad was a high school basketball coach. My mom was a volleyball coach and a PE teacher. So sports have been it from the very beginning. And played Division III volleyball and softball when I was an undergrad, but really didn't think about it as a professional opportunity until later in life. So I ended up out of college thinking I wanted to be a jury consultant. I actually went to grad school for a couple years for social psychology. I know, I thought I was going to be like in a John Grisham novel, telling people how to manage it. And when you go to those programs, they actually overlap with law school classes. And I realized very quickly I am probably more of a practitioner than an academic. I really enjoyed kind of the practical, quick advice. So I ended up taking a detour to law school, went to University of Chicago Law School here locally. And then out of law school, I did a clerkship for a year in Houston and then came back to Chicago and practiced in big law for about 5 years. And then from there, I ended up going in-house at DePaul University doing collegiate sports. And I was there for over a decade before I took the current gig.
Well, that sounds great. I always like hearing about DePaul. My father was a DePaul graduate class of 1934.
Oh, nice. Awesome. Go Blue Demons.
Yeah. But it's interesting you're talking about this joint role you had. I had a similar thing when I was both a business affairs executive and a legal affairs executive, kind of wearing 2 hats, but the legal hat always predominates. Recently, as part of your administrative role, you say you've taken over HR and IT, which makes me have to jump into everyone's favorite subject, privacy, wondering whether we have any of it left. And in that regard, we live in a world now where collection of data seems to be everywhere. And I'm sure it's an issue you have to deal with, not just in people coming onto maybe the Fire website, but I assume you guys are in the world of ticketless entry these days?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are the parameters around that data collection? And have you had any pushback, or is it just people accept that's the way of the world?
I think that there is, I mean, as a lawyer, I think you and I both know this. I feel like privacy is one of the most high risk fraught areas that there is. And it's also technology keeping up with that issue. So trying to make sure that you're always anticipating ways to use the data. I mean, my take on it is there's so much intricate, complex privacy law, both here, California, across the world, that it really comes down to the principles. And are you kind of transparent about what you're doing with it? Are you getting the right permissions? I try to look at it from a big picture angle. So I think when you're dealing with consumers, they're very savvy. It's just making sure that you're transparent with how you're using the information. And that if they come to you and say, hey, I don't like this, I want to be done, that you give them that opportunity and that quick out. And so you're only dealing with people who really want to be in your space and kind of get access to your products. But I think from that perspective, I think we also want to just make sure more and more you're customizing to the fan, right, and the consumer. And so giving them opportunities of, okay, what kind of information do you want? What kind of data would you like about us? And I feel like that really resonates with people having that choice and that agency.
In your particular space in professional soccer, I think we've seen in America that previous efforts, particularly in the early 1970s, where there was an application of a top-down approach, oh, bring Pele, everybody will come to see soccer, didn't work.
Yeah.
And you're in a professional soccer league that is, I believe, part of the fabric of American sport. It's not just baseball, basketball, football, hockey. You got to say, and soccer, because over the last 60 years, we've really developed a culture of soccer in this country from a bottom-up approach, which was the development of youth soccer programs in America. So now you're seeing knowledgeable soccer fans, not like it was even 30 years ago, where it was a lot of expats who knew the game, but now it's become very much an American game. Does that benefit the growth of professional soccer in America, having so many native-born players?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And also just having so many global connections to the sport. I mean, certainly when I was growing up, I grew up in a small town, soccer wasn't even an option. So when I came to this job, ironically, the sport I knew the least about was soccer. And obviously it's been amazing to learn it, and I've grown to very quickly love it and appreciate it. But I do feel like we have so many more families now with children who grow up playing soccer, and that is their primary start, and they can start so much younger than a lot of the other sports. That's what my kids did. They played soccer, and then probably in the last several years, it used to be American football was on the TV during the holidays, and that has transitioned in my house to soccer, global soccer. And I feel like that's only going to increase as people cycle through. And then you've got kind of, from our standpoint, soccer purists, the people who truly love the sport and know so much about it. But we are very quickly also bringing on just sports fans in general who realize it's a global sport, it's accessible to everyone. And, there's so many characters and players that you can connect to. And so I feel like we have both growth models and kind of who we're targeting to really help grow the game.
Well, you talk about it being such an international sport, and as we've seen, I live in Los Angeles. I experienced the David Beckham effect, and it was really an effect. Miami, and I think the whole league is seeing the Messi effect.
Yeah.
As such, these are bringing international players into America to play a sport. Are there concerns about those kind of visas that these players need to get to come here and play? Has that changed at all over the last 3 weeks?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes and no. I mean, I feel like in the larger context, when you're operating a business with staff of any kind, including players, like you're always very much attuned to how immigration laws are changing or the politics of what might make it harder. But at the end of the day, they're coming over specifically to play professional sports. So I think in that space, their visas are very targeted at what they're doing. And that need and desire for professional entertainment and professional sports is still going to continue. So it's something that we kind of pay close attention to. And I think we'll have to monitor as, the months and weeks progress. But I feel like it's something where we should be able to still get folks into it. And I also think that's part of what makes the sport really cool is that, people from Chicago and elsewhere can come to a match and kind of see themselves out on the pitch, no matter where they're from. I think we are a more global sport than any other, and that's reflected in the makeup of our players. I mean, I think we had, 20 plus countries represented at one point on our roster. So it's been really cool to watch that grow too.
So is there any effort? I know that in other sports, as they're developing an audience, and I've always believed that ultimately for sports to succeed, you need stars. And we've seen more and more stars coming out of Major League Soccer, and I think that helps attract an audience. But is there any emphasis on trying to develop more homegrown stars than having to go out in the world, or is it blind? You're just looking for the best talent?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's absolutely an emphasis to try to really develop the best talent. And I think that that's something that we've been increasingly successful in the US too. So that model in particular was new to me coming from other sports backgrounds. Is just the clubs having kind of their own academies where they're really developing talent from a very young age. And soccer, probably more so than the other sports, can pull from talent levels going back to 14, 15-year olds where you've got really promising talent that you want to develop. So we've been very good here. I think other clubs across MLS have as well, as kind of building that framework so that they're able to really bring in local talent. And the other thing that appeals to then is also your local audiences, right? One of our own came to be successful in this space. Come watch them and cheer them on.
So does the Fire have an academy?
We do, yes. So we have an academy program for 13-year-old and above, so teams at kind of each age range. And they come in and they play with us, and it's kind of the players that we want to develop, hopefully turn into future professional players. And then we also have a second team. So that's more of a development team. Those are a combination of amateur and professional players, but really, again, meant to be a pipeline into the first team. But I do spend a fair amount of my work both in the kind of people space and the legal space on managing the academy issues and making sure that we're really supporting the players there.
And in supporting the players, obviously, if you have a mix of, is the academy both, are they all amateurs, or is there a mix in the academy of some professional and some amateur players?
It's mostly amateur, but there may be some professionals as you get later in age. And then they typically transfer over to that second team or to the first team, depending on how they're progressing.
And the issue is most teams in professional sports, you're dealing with a situation where the players have a collective bargaining unit. Is that true of MLS?
Yeah, it is true for the first team. So the players in MLS are actually employees of the league, not the individual clubs. And so MLS kind of manages the CBA and the issues, and obviously we pay attention to that and support as well. And then when it comes to the second team, there is no bargaining group currently. Those are employees of the individual clubs. So we manage them like we would our own employees. And then academies are really people who've gotten an access and opportunity to the private program. So they're employees of no one. They're just folks coming in to play in those programs, try and get a shot at advancing.
And is MLS subject to a salary cap?
Yes.
And that was bargained between the league and the Players Association?
Yes. It's a very complicated
Yeah.
salary cap, salary rules. That's typically handled more so by our sporting team in dealing with the players there. And then with the league, they have their kind of own player relations, player management group that manages those details. So we manage it less at the club level, or at least with the Fire.
So, with respect to getting down from top, we're getting just to your particular club. On your active roster, how many of your players currently are not U.S. citizens that are subject to having visas in order to play? Is it a pretty big percentage?
It typically has been, but our roster has been changing pretty quickly here. But we typically have a good number of folks coming in from abroad. I couldn't say specifically what it is right now.
And another one of my other questions, and it's across all of sports, particularly in football and basketball and baseball. Not so much in hockey; it's a little different. But a lot of the sports, their pipeline is through colleges and universities,
Mm-hmm.
where there's basically a training ground in those sports at the collegiate level, and then they rise to go into professional sports. Are you seeing much of that in soccer, or is it more younger people going right into the professional ranks rather than working through college? Is there any rhyme or reason to where players come from?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of them are already developing before they hit college age. And I think, again, that's unique to soccer and the skills that it requires. But a lot of them are in academies, whether it's here or in other places, and they are coming up through those academies and then moving out to other teams. Some of them do go through colleges, though. but a lot of times some of the skills kind of peak before that age. So I think it's a little unusual in that respect. And like I said, I think that's what we end up managing a lot of times on the risk side and the legal side is you're sometimes pulling in, 14, 15-year-old kids with this amazing level of talent that you want to grow and develop. But they're also, kids who are, learning how to develop in education and kind of learning, just growing as people and trying to make sure that they're supported, that they're protected, that they've got a safe environment to grow, not just as a player, but as, good contributing citizens. So I feel like it's a little bit more holistic environment in the academy space because you're really trying to educate and grow the whole person, not just the player.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know just as recently as, let's say, 20 years ago, the kids I knew that came up through youth soccer and then they played club soccer, which is a whole animal in and of itself. And then their next step was to go to college to continue developing their skills. And then from there, seeing if they could catch on here or overseas. That seems to have changed significantly, that college isn't a necessary next step as there's more levels of professionalism. I think the US has what, 3 tiers of professional soccer now?
Yeah,
Something like that?
there's a good amount. Yes. Yeah, I do think that that has definitely changed. I think it's still definitely an option to go through college, but like you said, it's not a necessity anymore.
Yeah, and the reason I brought up college is obviously, a favorite 3 letters of this podcast and many others are NI and L, which has changed sort of the face of amateurism. Whether or not that still truly exists is still very much an open question. But if you have the opportunity to, let's say, try to make it through an academy after high school, you're a quality player, you have an academy, you can go through that, hopefully to get picked up, play for the big team, or you can go to college and maybe make some NIL money. Are
Hmm.
you seeing any action there where people are going, I'm going to go to college because I can make some money. If I go to the academy, I'm not going to make any money. Is there a battle there between the paths of these athletes?
At least from my perspective, I don't know that that's a battle. I feel like it's usually looking at long term, what's my best path to the pros and how am I going to get there the quickest? And so I don't see it being an economic decision very often where they think they can get some money in between there at the collegiate level. And I don't know that we've reached that level yet with the sport. But again, I feel like there's paths either way.
So you mentioned earlier about this being MLS being a single ownership model. Is that a correct statement? With the league
Yes.
owns all the
Yes.
teams and
Yeah.
um, so it may not be under your bailiwick, but the players are signing contracts with the league or with the teams?
The first team players, so that's the main professional team, they're signing agreements with the league. So they are employees of the league. And
And
then
how
the
does
league
that work legal?
negotiates
How does
theirs.
that work legally that they're fire players if there's contracts with the league?
Yeah.
What's the mechanics there?
That's the antitrust magic that Major League Soccer put together very well.
Go
I am not
Don.
going to tread into, getting ahead of myself on pretending to be an antitrust expert by any means. I just know that that is how the structure operates, that each of the
Right.
teams, their employees are employees with the league. And then when you talk about our second teams, those are our actual employees.
And so do each of the clubs in MLS negotiate at all with their players, or are they talking to the league? What's the structure there?
I
It's
think it's in
I've never really
partnership.
understood it.
Yeah, it's in partnership. I mean, the league has a national player relations office who's very good, very helpful on those issues, and it's in partnership kind of as you identify talent and want to pursue talent. I think the clubs absolutely have some leadership and agency there, but they work in partnership with the league. And as
Yeah,
I said,
because
more of my day to day, and I think this varies across MLS clubs, but more of my that is more of our sporting team and their day to day, and less so of our day to day of managing those individual player negotiations.
so I guess as part of all of these responsibilities, you get to be a real estate lawyer too, don't you?
Yes. Well, isn't that the new sports lawyer? I feel like that is a requirement now that everyone needs to know real estate and antitrust.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky because I was a real estate lawyer before I became a quote unquote sports lawyer. And the antitrust part, it's kind of hard to avoid not knowing about it if you're in the sports world. And it's interesting because when I speak at law schools and they say, well, what courses, if I want to do what you do, what courses should I take? And when I mention labor law and antitrust, the groans are softening over the years.
Right.
But those are two subject areas that I don't think you can really be involved in sports, certainly in America, and not know at least to spot the issues in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think real estate gets tossed in there now, in depth. I feel like that seems to be the future of sports is building stadiums, building mixed use developments around those.
Yeah, and that's the whole uh, wild card. The crazy interesting thing to me is that no one seems to want to just build a stadium anymore. You got
Right.
to build an entertainment center around it, housing, development. It's changed how things are done. Part of it is the magic of getting municipalities, local governments, et cetera, involved and helping to fund these, to develop, to create the tax base. And part of it is to eventize the game beyond just the game. With respect to the fire, where are you guys in terms of stadiums, development, and those kinds of activities?
Yeah. So we actually just opened in the last few weeks our new performance center. So we built a new training facility in the southwest side of the city. It's been in project for a couple years here, in partnership with the city, and that's been awesome. It's very exciting. And then we are also exploring the stadium opportunity. So our owner loves the city, wants to be in Chicago. So it's something where we're actively looking, and obviously, deadlocked with real estate, given his commitment to the city. But it's certainly something we're hoping to do, and it feels to be very meaningful to have your own soccer specific stadium. So right now we play in Soldier Field, which is where the Chicago Bears also play. And it's a really cool historic landmark building, but it's also, built for football, and there are some limitations that come with that. And so having your own soccer specific stadium and development area would be really exciting if we can find the right opportunity.
Yeah, I think that the certainly in MLS, having a 25,000 seat stadium that you can pack is creates a better environment, and also as the TV guy makes much better television when you're not seeing big swaths of empty
Right.
seats.
Right.
And Soldier Field's a big old joint.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then I think the space around it just gets folks to kind of spend larger days there instead of coming and going. So it's greater
Right.
investment in the neighborhood and hopefully ideally kind of building a community around the stadium. So you're not just jumping into a space, but really building a network in a community where people can come and go.
So as a lessee at Soldier Field, have they been good landlords? Are you working with them? Do you have the ability to? Do you have a long-term arrangement with them?
Yeah, we've been there at Soldier Field before I joined. So we've been there. We've got an agreement with them long term, and obviously are kind of working with them on always finding ways to improve it. I think the difficulty is that Soldier Field hosts a lot of other events for the city. So the Bears are the primary tenant there. They were there before we showed up. So there's some restrictions that come with that, and then they host very large concerts, and that tends to interfere with our schedule, with trying to get summer matches in, because obviously in Chicago we want to try and get folks in here when it's a little warmer, rather than when there's snow on the ground. So it
Yeah.
just, having exclusive control of your space and your competition area would be ideal, I think, in the long run. But we've definitely worked with the city and with the park district over the years to try and do what we can with the Soldier Field space. And I know our owner absolutely loves the city and loves that landmark.
So there could be a fire specific stadium in the future if one were to have a wish.
Absolutely. I think we would love that.
Well, I think as the league grows and as you see the magic media money seem to increase that gets distributed to the teams, these are all real opportunities for the sport. And I think given that it is one of the big sports in America these days. And I think if you look at attendance numbers and interest in the sport, to develop a soccer specific stadium with the ability to keep your audience there for other activities and other events, I think this is going to happen across all of MLS. And being in the third largest media market, it seems like Chicago's ready. And I think you'll be more of a real estate lawyer than you might have ever wished pretty soon.
I'm happy to do that. But we definitely had the experience too with the performance center of going through that process as well, working with the community, working with the local government. And part of what we've done there is really invest in the community. So putting millions of dollars into kind of building out larger spaces for them as well, making sure that they're included in the jobs that we have that are resulting from that. So I feel like it's been a good trial run for if we were to find the right opportunity for a stadium.
Were you able to put in a practice pitch out at the new performance center?
Yes.
Well,
Yes. So
that's
we've got a
that's
few
huge.
fields out there and then it's got our first team, our second team, and our academy players are all able to practice out there, which has been great.
And any community uses allowed to those pitches?
Yes, absolutely. We've got a foundation too that runs a lot of youth programming, and they were already in the area running youth programming. So trying to
I-
build in that, having already been in that community and trying to give them opportunity there.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I know a bunch of kids who grew up in and around Chicago that I met, a million years ago when I was an undergraduate, and they grew up in soccer programs. I grew up in Los Angeles. There was a little tiny soccer program being run down in Torrance, California called AYSO. But when
Oh
I
yeah,
was in
my
school,
kids played at AYSO. I was actually a coach for them.
I can't even tell you how deeply into AYSO I was as a parent, coach, and
Yeah, were you
administrator
coaching
for
too?
many years. Oh, yeah, I had all the certifications you could ever want. But it was great. Great organization, uh, amazing lessons learned. And, you know, I always looked at coaching, especially teaching little kids. And I coached up until probably under 16s. Um, but for the little ones, I was more concerned about them learning than
Hmm.
scores. They all
Yeah,
knew the scores. No, if you're 5 years old, they would know we won 13 to 11 or
that's
whatever. I
right.
didn't keep track.
And the parents.
Parents is a whole other subject.
Yeah.
But I also coach little league, so I'll take soccer parents over little league parents any day of the week.
No, amen to that. Yeah.
But I think what's really important is the fact that it's not just what you guys are doing that I think is unique in soccer overall is that you're not just worrying about the team that's playing in the league, but you're involved in the culture of the sport and the development of the sport from the bottom up as well as from the top down. And that's how you get the foothold that MLS finally has in America. So hats off to MLS, to you guys, to all the other teams that are really getting what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. I also feel like at that age, your goal is to just teach them to love the sport, right? And
Right.
they get out there and they play, and they may not win, they may not score, but if they're enjoying themselves, they're going to come back, whether it's to play again, whether it's to watch a match. Hopefully, you build kind of a growing affiliation and love for that sport, and then they're coming when they can get in and buy their own tickets and bringing their families. And that's actually how our owner ended up owning the team. His son played youth soccer and he started to go to the matches and he just really loved the sport, and that's how he ended up purchasing the team. So the connections definitely start young.
Well, I think, look, I mean, I've watched this sport for 50 odd years now, fits and starts. And I remember, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago when the new stadium opened here in LA for LAFC, and I went to a match, and it was my aha moment because I looked to that north end of the stadium, and I could have been anywhere in the world with the
Right.
fan behavior.
Right.
And that's when I said, it's here, it's real, it's done. Uh, it's a major sport. It's
Yeah.
not and MLS. It's NFL, MLB, NHL, NBA, MLS. Say them all together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been a fun part of the gig too, is getting to know that passion of the fans. Feel like in soccer in particular, having the supporters around, and the passion that they bring to it, it's really kind of a lifelong community that folks develop with the affiliation to their sport. Like it represents their community and their city as much as themselves. And I feel like that's been really cool to see.
It from a guy who's on the outside, it's really cool to see. So I think you guys are onto something special. Well, look, Laura, thanks for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to chat with us a little bit about your job, what's going on in MLS, how it's sort of set up. I really enjoyed talking about this. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule today.
Yeah,
Really appreciate it.
absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. We got to host you for a match for sure. Same to
Oh,
anybody who's watching. You want to come to a Chicago Fire match? Hit me up.
it might have to be in the spring.
Yeah, that's a good call. Good call. We'll wait till it warms up a little bit.
Yeah, and for those of you that are here that are not yet members of the Sports Lawyers Association, we're on an annual membership. So if you were a member and you haven't renewed, your membership expired at the end of December, which means that very shortly you're going to get cut off from all the good stuff you get as a member of the SLA. So please go to sportslaw.org and renew your membership. And if you're not already a member, the only question is why? Join the SLA. And hope to see you all in May in Nashville for our annual conference, looking back on Gulp 50 years of the Sports Lawyers Association. So I know you'll be there, Laura. You're a regular attendee. Hopefully, you'll be doing a little stage acting on our ethics panel. You never know who we drag in. But
Absolutely.
but thank you again for today, and thank you again for your support of the SLA.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. I feel like this stuff is critical no matter what stage of your career in. So helpful to have the resources, the network, and just kind of help you navigate where you want to take your career. So happy to be a part of it.
Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.